Welcome back to the latest edition of the 30 for 30 podcast videocast. This is Coach Marvin Nash. iCoach presents the 30 for 30. My guest today is Clint Hormann. Clint is a veteran coach, dabbled in real estate, currently with BSN right now. Clint, it's just a pleasure to have you on, man. I feel like I've known you forever.
Yeah, thanks, Coach Nash. I'm excited to be here, man. I'm honored.
Thank you. First thing I noticed is that big old ring that's sitting on your finger right there. Let's talk a little bit about the coaching background and what got where you are.
Yeah. So, I grew up in Kansas City, moved to Texas right after I graduated from college, and came to Texas because in this state, honestly, I feel like coaches are treated like professionals, and that was important to me. It wasn't something that I thought was a hobby. It wasn't something I wanted to do on the side. And you're in Texas, but to give us an opportunity to get better. Professional development's a big part of the coaching profession in Texas, and I knew that the facilities and the backing by the community, quite frankly, were just going to be tremendous. I played with guys from Texas, and it was clear that, gosh, they were so far ahead of us. We were just playing catch up with every one of those guys, and I was like, man, I want to know why that is. So I got down to Texas, and 17 years on the field. Was blessed to work with and for some incredible people. Had some tremendous kids, talented and otherwise. I really feel like I'm lucky, man. I'm blessed to have had the career I got to have. Yeah, no question.
Absolutely. I know with coaching in Texas, we get treated like royalty down here. There's also a tremendous amount of responsibility that we have as coaches to relate to our players. I know in 17 years of coaching, you probably haven't had to go through what we're seeing these past few weeks in our nation. But what's some advice for some young coaches that you have to relate to your guys?
It's funny you say that. I work with BSN now, and I spend a lot of time in a lot of different coaches' offices. And sometimes I find myself not just talking about equipment and uniforms and things like that, but especially when I'm with a young coach, I like to talk and maybe try to advise them a little, just kind of impart some wisdom, I guess, is the best way. When I see something that I think is easy for them to do and they'd like to hear. But, I've talked to a couple guys this week, and I know everybody's excited about June 8th and getting back with their kids and getting to work out this summer. Of course, I'm very excited about that opportunity for those guys as well. And I said, next week, there's no roadmap for this. No one has seen what we have seen. And obviously the pandemic situation is one thing. Our country is literally burning now. There's a lot of emotional things that are going to have to be navigated by a lot of guys whose job it is to coach football, coach baseball, softball, whatever, and all of a sudden they're going to have to be a true psychologist to some degree. And I said, man, the only advice I would give you guys is to give yourself some grace, because the greatest plans that you have on paper really are going to mean nothing by the end of the day on Monday. The good Lord's already showed us that you can't predict anything. So that's it, man. If you just show up and you care and you love them and they'll know that, man, the rest of it's going to fall into place, and I think that's what everybody needs right now. We needed that before, the situation that we're dealing with across the country, but prior, with the pandemic, it's just being there for one another, and letting these kids know that they're part of your family and that you love them and they have value. And I think that's what we see with what happened in Minnesota. I think what we see is a feeling that, that life, that Black life in particular, doesn't have the value that somebody else's life has. And if we, and I mean all of us, man, I talked to you earlier about how difficult a conversation that is for a white person to have right now, because I think, I like to believe the vast majority of Caucasian people want to do the right thing and want to say the right things. And sometimes, quite frankly, they're just uncomfortable with it. And so you and I having these conversations have value, but telling those kids you love them, not because they're on your team, but because they're a human being, that they just have value in and of itself. The good Lord put them here for a purpose, and helping them achieve that purpose. So I think if you asked me how I would start Monday, I would start off with, man, I love you. I'm so glad to see you guys. And I mean, I love you like you're my own son, you know? And I think a lot of coaches get that. I think that's why they do what they do. But just sometimes we got to remember that is the main thing. You know, that's more important than anything that you do out there on that field, on that court. So.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. A big thing for me, man, I call it the longest spring break ever, but we went to spring break and never came back. I instantly started thinking, okay, I got some kids that depend on us for their meals. I got some kids that depend on us to help them with their homework. You know, we have a whole tutorial session right there in our locker room or right there in the coach's office sometimes. And so we have a whole group of kids who've been depending upon us all year long, and all of a sudden that's snatched away. And that kept me up at night. And I always wonder if parents outside of coaching realize that coaches stay up all night thinking about other people's kids sometimes.
No question.
It's crazy, you know. And so the spring break did what it did, and we turned into COVID-19 quarantine. And then during the quarantine, we see all of some of the worst images of our country that I've ever seen. I've lived through some things. I'll start with this little small story from my son, 14 years old, and I just asked him this 2 days ago. I just asked myself, "Okay, you understand what's happening right now? Do you see like everything?" He's like, "I just know that a guy was killed by a police officer and he wouldn't get off his neck. That's all I really know." I said, "Well, you know history, right?" He's like, "Yeah, we learned about Martin Luther King Jr. You taught me about him." And he said they marched all the time. But he said, "Dad, if being peaceful worked, how come it's still happening right now?" I said, "Man,
right.
Good point."
Right.
I said, "Well, when I was your age or a little bit older, I saw the LA riots with Rodney King."
Yeah.
And he said, "Dad, if violence worked, then how come it's still going on even since you were a kid?" I said, "You're right. I don't know." And so we're looking for the answers right now. Just I know what I think. I want to know what you think. What's a way that we can help bring some unity to this nation?
Yeah. So I think, you know, you and me talking about it right now is a big part of that. You know, like I said, you got to have the courage to speak. You know, again, we talked about Colin Kaepernick earlier before we started recording, but, you know, and I told you about what a quandary that puts a coach in, right? Because you want to approach that from the right perspective. You want to teach the right lesson. And there's obviously still going to be people that, you know, taking a knee during the national anthem is unacceptable. I don't care what the reason is for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I truly, coach, I see both sides of that argument. And I think that's a place where we have gotten in this country that we seem to not be able to get past, is that literally, no pun intended, like these things are not black and white, right? There's not a right and wrong. It's not clearly defined. It's a very gray discussion, you know, and unity, I think, looks like, you know, I care about you as a human being, you know, period. Even if that makes me uncomfortable because of the way I was raised, or even if everybody I've ever known told me was to not to hate you, I still see you as a human being. You know, and I think I pray and I feel like the young folks that I had in my classroom in the last decade, people the same age as your children, my son, I did feel like I feel like they're getting it maybe better than people our age, coach. And I really thought that we would get it. I thought we would figure it out, man. I had high hopes. I thought we'd come so far. You know, President Obama gets elected, and I thought, man, a black man is the president of our country in the United States. No one in their right mind would have ever thought that was going to happen. And we have tipped the scales. And what I didn't know was that we did tip the scales. I think what happened was you saw, you know, without getting into the political spectrum, I think without question, there's quite a few people that showed up at the polls because a black man was elected, and they were against that for no other reason than he was a black man. And, you know, never mind the fact that he's completely qualified to do the job, whether you agree with his politics or not, it's really irrelevant. You know, I think as an educator, which you are, and many of the people that you work with in your profession are, I think we have to have those conversations in our classroom. We have to not be afraid to get uncomfortable a little bit, because here's what it looks like when we don't, right? You have the death of George Floyd, well, not the death, the murder of George Floyd. And you've got a bunch of people that have been kept in their house for a long time. So they're already on edge. I mean, and the murder of George Floyd would have been a spark for a fire anyway. But man, now we've got this boom, and I think the only way we're ever going to be able to bring it back together is if people that look like me in particular speak on it out loud in front of people that, I have these thoughts sometimes, man, and I'm kind of rambling, but I think sometimes as a white man that is around a lot of white people, because I mean, that's not abnormal, as you know, I think sometimes people, they get a little loose-lipped around me sometimes. And they think that maybe I think the way they do sometimes. And I'm not afraid to check them, and I'll say that's inappropriate. That's disrespectful. Why would you ever choose to use that language around anyone? Why would you think it's okay to say that in front of me? What about me makes that okay? And I think when we step up and start defending our brothers and sisters and truly looking at each other like brothers and sisters, man, I think we'll start to see some change. And I told you before, and I used to tell my students this too, no great protest. There's no such thing as a great protest that doesn't make people uncomfortable, period. Otherwise, it's just another day at the office, right? I mean, it's a flash in the pan and it's gone. And your son hit on it. That's what he's saying is, what happened? If all these things were so important, why are we still here? Why are we still having this conversation? And so we've got to keep that energy, and try to harness it. I don't have those answers, man. I just know that we've got to not. So when people are like, I'm tired of hearing people talk about racism. I'm tired of hearing, me too. Yeah. Me too. But if we don't talk about it, it's not going to go away, right? Yeah. As a coach, one of the things that you understand is if you don't talk about winning a championship, it's probably not going to happen. You've got to speak it into existence. You've got to put that, like when you go on a diet, you got to tell everybody, man, I'm on a diet. You got to say it. Why? Because we're going to hold each other accountable. Mm-hmm. And that's what speaking on it does, is it forces us to hold each other accountable. And I think that's a big part of unity. And I think all sides of humanity in the United States have got to be okay with that. And we're not going to agree all the time, man, And I think people got to let go of that and not be afraid to maybe say something offensive and backtrack and say, my bad, man. I didn't. Kaepernick's a perfect example. Colin Kaepernick's a perfect example. So I think there are a lot of people today that look back at Colin Kaepernick and thought this is disrespectful, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't understand what he's doing. And I've seen it myself. I've heard people say, okay, now I get it. Now I get it, And that's big, right? We got to be, we got to allow ourselves to grow. We got to allow ourselves to change. And we got to accept that people could have been wrong 10 years ago and said things that they regret today and realize, okay, I was wrong and I said something wrong. And although I may not be able to go back and erase that pain that I caused, I'm a better person today than I was then. And here's how I'm going to do that. So, that's my thoughts on it.
You put some gems out there. One thing sparked just a thought in my mind. The first thing is, as coaches, us being coaches, we push our kids to get comfortable being uncomfortable. There's no growth in the comfort zone. We say that so much, but then we find so much growth on both sides, or we find stagnant growth on both sides because we want to be comfortable in our own ignorance. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That puts us in a situation where we're telling our kids one thing, and I'm gonna revert to this probably a lot because one, there was no sports on. It's the only thing I watched, and I've already watched it like 4 times. But The Last Dance.
Oh man, so good.
Yes. One thing that stuck with me, man, is that he always said, look, I demanded a lot from the people around me, but I didn't tell them to do anything that I wasn't willing to do myself. So if I'm demanding people to finally hear me, what I'm saying about how there is a systematic level of racism and, we're not on equal playing fields, doesn't mean I can't be successful. It just means I started a little bit behind that. you hear me saying that, but it doesn't mean I'm gonna quit and ask for a handout from anybody. It doesn't mean that I'm gonna beg you to see things my way. I just want you to listen because I'm gonna listen to you. Um, that led me to a second thought. All this happened real while you were talking. I was like, oh man, he's saying some amazing things. The next part of this is thinking back on the military view of disrespecting the national anthem or the flag. And I was torn because the only man I knew as a father, my stepfather, is a retired Marine. I have grandparents and uncles and even aunts that have been in every branch of the military. But it was said to me like this from my stepfather. He said, "Hey, did you know that my father was in the military and he fought for 2 years, defended our country, 2 years before he was able to even be registered to vote for the Fair Voting Rights Act. So he was fighting for rights of people who didn't even see him as a human being. And when they did, they saw him as 3/5 of a human being."
Right.
I said, "Oh, wow. Okay. That hit me right there, because you can't say somebody doesn't love their country because they want to be treated fairly, especially when our ancestors fought for all the rights that everyone else has in the country." So that floored me. So I believe just having some open conversation, being able to say both sides, this is what's going on. What are we going to do to be better about it? Will help us as a nation as a whole. But unfortunately, well, maybe fortunately, I've been known my 16 years of coaching. I'm very confrontational, but I'm very positive in being confrontational. I smile a lot because I'm a happy guy. I'm blessed. I'm just blessed to be here. But at the same time, if I see something, I say something. And
right.
I don't want to carry the weight of, does he think that? Does he not think that? Let's get it out in the open, talk about it.
Amen, man. Amen.
And so it seems like we do a whole lot of say a comment here and then run and hide, throw a rock and then hide our hand. Let's not do that. Let's just have some conversation.
Right.
So, I think we're saying almost the same exact thing. Mm-hmm. It's just from two different perspectives, but meeting in the same area that we agree. We got to talk. We got to talk about it. We have to.
No doubt. And I think, man, you hit on it right there. I think if people would have that open dialogue, I mean, you're married. How long have you been married?
Man, I've been married, 16 years now.
Okay, I'm about to be 17 here, right? So, man, congratulations. And it's funny sometimes. It makes me think about me and my wife, because if anybody's been married as long as we have, they've been in an argument once or twice, right? It's just, yeah. But how many times have you and your wife, and finally one of you just stop and go, we actually agree. We're just not. It's not connecting. We're saying the same thing, but we're saying it different ways. And I think we all, and again, that's human nature. I mean, we're all going to fall short, man. It's just the way we can't be perfect. But I think if we would just stop and listen to one another for a second, we would find out that, we're not that far apart, man. That I read Malcolm Gladwell a lot. And anybody that's listening to this that knows me is like, he talks about Malcolm Gladwell all the time. Well, I think the guy's brilliant, and he makes some great points and pulls some great things together. He's so brilliant. Sometimes it's hard for me to explain what I think he said. But he talks about how he's got a great new book. I think it's called Talking to Strangers out. And it just talks about how we can fool ourselves into thinking we know what the other guy is thinking when we are so far from that, because we don't truly listen. We don't allow it to get in. We've decided what they think before we hear them say it, and isn't that really what racism is? You've decided who somebody is before you ever know them. That's tragic. I mean, that's tragic. It's ignorant. It's stupid. It's a complete waste of energy. Thankfully, I was raised to not be that way. But my grandmother, God bless her and God rest her soul, I love her. It's my grandmother. She's from Mississippi, and she was bad, man. That N-word was like her second favorite word. And I remember getting in trouble for being disrespectful, because I'm telling you, man, anybody that knows me, I don't have a filter, okay? And sometimes I don't read the room so well. And I was like, Grandma, you can't. Please don't do that while I'm here. I love you. And, but but it was a decision that she had made. And I always found it very strange. It was hard for my brain to understand because she would have people in her house of color and they were friends. And I'm like, how do you like, how does that work for you? How do you say you don't like this particular race of people, but I like this one?
Yeah.
I don't get that. I just, and so I guess maybe I fall short. I struggle sometimes to understand the mentality of folks and things that seem so absurd to me are so common for other people. My grandmother was raised in the South, in Mississippi, in the 30s and 40s, where that's just the way things were. Well, okay, well, it ain't like that anymore, and I get tired of hearing that excuse too. Well, that's just the way things were. Cool. Well, are we not trying to get better? Are we not trying to work forward? So, yeah, man, I don't even know what I was talking about. I just got off on a tangent. I hope you know how to edit this.
Oh, we are unedited. This is
unfiltered. Right on.
Yes,
right on.
Yes, we're gonna keep it inside as real as possible, man. That brings me to some things. I want to get some knowledge from you, man, because I know you've done a few different things. But let's start with the biggest lesson that you learned from a coaching mentor that you were able to apply to life, something that you could apply and use in everything you do.
Man, that's a hard one. You learned so many. Like I said, man, I've been blessed to have some great coaches, man. I guess the best thing I can bring to the table is my senior year. The guy that I when I think of my high school football coach, he was only my high school football coach my senior year, but he was kind of a local legend, and he was a white dude, and most of my teammates were not. Most of my teammates were African American. And I just remember he was so comfortable with us all the time. And I could tell, man, he was one of us. I don't know how else to say that. And I remember being recruited to play college football and not working out. Like I just didn't get the scholarship offer and I was brokenhearted. And he talked me into playing junior college football. And straight up, did not enjoy that for 5 seconds, but to each his own, because somebody, that's a great avenue. It wasn't my route. I was going to go a different direction. But I remember him like saying to me, he said, how do you know that's not what you want to do? He's like, you can go. He's like, and he was the one that put that seed, I think, in my head that, dude, go try it. If you don't like it, don't do it anymore. Go do something else. Do multiple things. And that was coming from my high school football coach that was telling me that. That wasn't a football. He wasn't giving me football advice. He was giving me life advice. And he and I are tight to this day. And man, that has always stuck with me. It's probably the reason why I've dabbled in so many things. Not dabble. I mean, I go all in. All in on all of the things, because I enjoy life. I don't want to. I'm 42, man, and I don't want to look back and wonder, man, what if I had tried that? Right now, my wife, she knows me. She knows me. Like I've always wanted to fly an airplane. And and she's the only reason why I'm not flying an airplane right now. And she's terrified of that, and I just it's hard for me because once I've decided that I want to do something, I'm going to do it. I'm going to find a way to do it. So I'm not conventional, I guess. I've always been, and he taught me this too, and I use this a lot. So anybody that's been coached by me or had me in class has heard me say this, but average is a mathematical term. What it says is most things are like that. So it's normal. Average is normal, right? And he was like, be abnormal, be the weird dude. Go do some things that, so I've never had any hangups with being pigeonholed or fit into whatever it was that somebody else had a vision of me for, whether that was my mother and father, whether that was whoever, I've never had any issues with going and doing something else because, like I said, man, I just don't want to get to 70 years old and look back and say, I wish I had tried that, and that was probably and that's the thing I try to tell young people is, man, go do it. Go do it right now. What are you waiting on? Maybe that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing, and when you're 40, if you're not sure, go try that too, because there's no timetable on that, man. We only get to be on this planet one time. Let's do it. So I'm passionate about that. And I got that from him.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time. That's huge. That's huge. And I'm going to share one of my, I have a lot of them too. I'm with you. You know, coaches changed my life. But the biggest one I say is the one that helped me get into the profession. I was, you know, coming out of high school, I was decent. I went to a little bitty 2A high school. We had one stoplight. We didn't even have a Sonic or a Dairy Queen. You know, it's that small of a town. And, you know, I thought maybe I play college ball, maybe not. Well, I got recruited by Louisiana College. They had just started up football, a little small D3. And the head coach there, we connected instantly. But at the same time, my mom was in the hospital. She had stage 4 cancer. I didn't have a father in the house at the time. And my dad left when I was 6, didn't have brothers or sisters. And she hadn't met my stepdad yet. So not to give away the story, but she's still living to this day. Beat state.
Oh, man. That's awesome, man.
But, man, it was he came from Louisiana to Houston to MD Anderson Hospital to recruit me, sure. But first thing he did was come in, and we had to put on the full body protective gear and everything else. She's having a bone marrow transplant that killed every living cell in her body, and it was regenerating, and it was a whole bunch of advanced stuff way back in the early 90s or mid 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So he comes in and he prays for us, and he talks to me. He says, "I don't care if you come to school with me. I just wanted to come and give you some encouragement." He said, "It doesn't matter how dark things look right now. God's still in control, and you can be whatever you want to be when you choose to be." And I ended up not going to school there. I got a better financial offer that we could afford at a different school. So I'm coming out. I'm coaching junior high ball. I like it. It's fine. But he reaches out to me. He sees my resume on the Texas high school coaches deal and says, "No way, this can't be the same guy." Calls me, says, "I want to offer you a job. come coach varsity ball for me." First varsity experience, you know what I mean? And
wow.
he brought me in this way. He said, "Yeah, I think you were supposed to come play for me in college. It didn't work out, but now I'm a high school coach, and you're coaching with me." And said it couldn't be better. So he took me under his wing. He taught me everything that he knows, maybe, or definitely everything I know, as far as running the program and being the leader. And what he told me after that fact, he said, "I saw you for what you could be, not for what you were." Because sometimes you meet people and they might be at their most broken. They might be at their lowest point.
Man, that's a fact.
There's no telling what they're going to be. So every kid I coach, I treat them like that, man. And it's weird. 2 days ago, I got a phone call. One of my kids runs I say kids, he's a grown man now, but he's on a radio show. He calls me and said, "We're talking about coaches and race relations, and I want to have you as a guest." And it was a text message. He said, "I don't know if you know who this is, but it's so-and-so. I don't know if you still have this number." I said, "Of course I got your number." I said, "I know when you might."
Man, I totally get that. I got every one of their numbers to this day.
Yes, we'll never delete it because you never know.
Nah.
My kids, man, they might need me.
Yeah.
And we're here to help. So that, that's how you know it's a calling. It's not just a job that you do. Like the stuff I make money on the side with, that's a job, sure. It's
sure, yeah.
A job. But when you're called to do something, that's something totally different, man.
That's a great story, man. He recruited you twice, man. You must have made a great impression on it.
Yeah, I was just being myself. We clicked, man. He's one of the first people I talked to, earlier in the week when things were getting crazy. He gave me a phone call, and it's been like that forever. It's those lifelong relationships you make. And I mean, I'm kind of like you. I've worked with some fantastic coaches, man. They pour into you and teach you things. And they prepare you to carry on the tradition, do what you need to do. You just put your own little spin on it, you and I, we're probably different cats than other guys that we work with, but
sure,
you need different personalities out there.
I did think of one, man, while we were talking and conversing here, and it's funny because you asked me, what someone who had coached me had said, and I immediately thought of myself as a player, and then I got thinking, man, I got coached a lot by some good coaches as a coach.
Yes.
And I thought about Coach Chris Ross, who is now the head coach at Lovejoy High School. And he probably still says it. I mean, it's something that I live by. It's something that I taught my students. And it certainly was something that kids heard from me on the football field. But he always said, play harder, longer than they're willing to play. And I don't know if he came up with that on his own, where that came from. But I remember thinking, that's it, man. that is what I believe in. I am going to go harder, longer than you are willing to go. Period. End of story. Put me in a room and I'm going to win the battle. You know, me versus whoever. You give me that opportunity and I am going to bury you, you know? And I think about that from a competitive standpoint. You know, we certainly live in a capitalist society where the competition is all around us all the time. And for better or for worse, it's the world we live in. And so I remember thinking that's probably the ultimate competitor thing that I live my life by, is that, you know, I'm gonna win. I'm gonna bet on this dude, and this dude's gonna beat you every time. And you might win the battle, but I'm gonna win the war, you know, and that stuck with me. And I have used that since the day I heard him say it. And I was like, man, that's it. That's the one thing that for sure sticks with me. And, you know, like you said, great coaches pour into other great coaches. That's something, not to get off on a tangent, but that's Coach Ross's magic, is he's a great coach of coaches. And so I always appreciate that about him.
No doubt. No doubt. I've some great coaches that have coached me as far as me being a younger coach. And, you know, one thing I've noticed is that there's a lot of different great coaching styles. I've had some that were teachers pull you aside. I had one in particular at Denton Guyer High School. He was like a brother to me, John Walsh, man. He
San Marcos now, yeah.
Yeah. When he's coaching you, he's coaching you. So
yeah.
I love
he's dialed in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Most intense man I've ever met. Love that, without a doubt.
That's funny. That's cool, man. That's cool.
Yes. Now, this is what we normally do, Clint, because this is season 1 of 30 for 30. I've kind of been grinding a little bit. You know, we're going to get 30 straight days of 30 conversations, and all
wow,
in a day.
You're getting it, man.
You'll see this on Friday, posted and ready to roll. So what I would like for you to do for season 1, if you have a mission statement, if you have, it sounds like you kind of go harder for longer than they're willing to go.
Yeah.
I would like for you to title this 30 for 30. What would you title it?
Oh, man, you put that on me. You didn't prep me for that. I didn't know that was coming. That's hard. I don't, man, I think if I had to give it a title right now, I would just say, remember to tell each other that we love each other. You know, I think we spend a lot of time talking about that subject, and rightfully so, because that's our current state of affairs right now. Is that I don't know you. I've never met you in person, you know, but I do love you as a human being. I love you as my fellow brother on this planet. And when I say that, I mean that, man. Like, I mean that. Like, you know, if you needed something, you don't know me, and you picked up the phone and said, man, can you help me? Yes. What can I do to help you? You know? And I think, you know, we could do ourselves a lot of good by actively looking for opportunities to help one another. I think a lot of the hatred that we see today would go away if we made that a habit, you know? And as coaches and people that have the opportunity to work with young people on a daily basis, you have the opportunity to do that, to have that kind of effect, to make that kind of change. You know, and again, I'm off on a tangent, but I'm from Kansas City. I'm a huge Kansas City Chiefs fan. Also a big fan of Texas high school football, so it works out good that Patrick Mahomes is our quarterback.
No doubt.
And the other day, Patrick said something to the effect of, you know, and I've heard a lot of people say it too, but I wish the world was a lot more like a football locker room, you know. And it's funny, man, how you get in that football locker room and all those kids real quick forget what color they are, how much money they do or don't have, who the cool kid is. Just being one of the dudes in the locker room and hanging out with your family, you know. And we know how we are with family. We let our guard down. We help one another. We give each other a hard time. You know, and I think if we could just kind of try to see random strangers as our family, it would help quite a bit, man. You know, and you're not always going to agree with your family. That's the other thing. Like, it doesn't have to always be smooth sailing. It's not going to be, you know. But giving that person an opportunity to show you who they are before you prejudge that. And I've never been particularly racist, so I'm not referencing that. But what I'm saying is I'm 42, 22-year-old me wasn't as open-minded. And I don't know that most, if I'm being perfectly honest, and I don't know many people that if they were being honest with, hopefully they have grown. Hopefully they have changed. Hopefully they have started to allow themselves to care and love about one another. We got to, man. We don't have a choice. We don't have a choice. If we don't, we're going to burn the whole thing down. And that's a tragedy, in and of itself, is that we allowed an ignorant thought process to control who we are in this country. And anyway, sorry, man. I could talk about it all day because I've always been very passionate about it. Always been very passionate about it. So.
Yeah, it's one of those things, man. If we never address the problem, it just festers and gets worse and gets worse and gets worse, and then it's out of control. And
it's the elephant. It's the elephant in the room. It's always there. It's always there. I wish it wasn't. I said earlier, I wish we weren't talking about it. I wish that wasn't the case, but people aren't imagining this, man. And I think, with George Floyd's murder and that being so visible, so visible. And you think back to Dr. King and why he had the influence he had. Well, Dr. King and television happened at a perfect time, right? And so George Floyd's murder being picked up by the television and social media has really spread that fire, I guess, more so than some other things that we've seen. I don't know why. Maybe it's because we were all on edge anyway. Yeah. But it's unfortunate that it took such a tragedy to bring about such an important conversation. And like I said, we've got to keep that energy, man. We can't let it die. We can't a week from now go back to being okay. Well, because here's the deal. If we let it go, it's going to happen again,
exactly.
and again and again. So
yeah, it's one of those things. Even this. If you think back, the Breonna Taylor deal, all this happened since we've been in quarantine.
Right? Yeah. There's so many people. Yes.
Yes. And it happens. And then everybody had a little, you felt uncomfortable about it. You felt some outrage towards it, but then you let it go. And then the next thing happens and you let it go. Then this one happens and it's just so brutal. It's just so deliberate and it's right there in your face and you can't ignore it. And I think that's what happened. You're already, it's like with a boxer. I used to box back in the day. A boxer, I'm hitting him with the jab, and it stuns you a little bit, but it just sets you up, and that knockout blow hurts so bad. It puts you all the way out. And I think that's what happened with the George Floyd. It just seeing it that brutal right there. Like, how could you do that to another human being? You wouldn't do that to an animal. If they were to a dog, my gosh, we'd be burning the city down too.
And I think the visible callousness with which it happened, number one, the vision of that police officer putting his hand in his pocket, like, this is no big deal.
Yes.
Like, this dude doesn't matter. He's literally beneath me. And then to see his fellow officers not have the guts. I don't know. I don't know why you wouldn't stop something like that. Fear, whatever their reasoning was, it's not good enough.
No.
And I think that's sickening for a lot of people. And I think that's why it's so powerful. This is not, Black people are not alone. And I think that's part of the power behind it too, is that it affected a lot of people, a lot of folks that normally wouldn't say something are saying something today. Yeah. I think we should give value to those people speaking and remember that a lot of people that are very uncomfortable saying the things that they're saying for the very first time in their life. But if we don't lift those people up and allow them to have that voice, if we try to quiet them, because it's not exactly what we want to hear, they'll be quiet. And then we'll be back to where we were. So we've got to continue to urge one another to see something, say something,
Yes.
And hold each other accountable, and behind closed doors.
Yes.
Behind closed doors, when those people that are your friends are saying those things because they think that you're wearing the camouflage, so to speak, you let them know, man, that's not cool. I love you and I care about you. And I'm not going to disown you as a friend or a family member, but that don't fly when I'm here. And I would appreciate if you learn to stop behaving that way. So.
That's
Anyway,
it. That's it. Holding each other accountable. Man, Clint, this time just flew by. Yeah, like talking to an old friend. So that's
right, man. I enjoyed the heck out of it, man.
yeah.
It's truly been an honor and a pleasure to meet you and get to talk to you. I appreciate getting the platform.
Thank you, thank you. I would allow, if I don't know if anybody can reach you, our listeners or viewers, they might want to contact you regarding any of the businesses you're involved with, or even just social media. If you would, just plug anything that you have.
Sure, I'm not I'm not going to plug anything, but I meant what I said. If somebody ever out there wants to talk coaching or anything else, economics, if somebody needs help, you can get me on my Twitter at Coach Hormann, HORMANN, and I'm always available, man. Like I said, I do actively look for ways to help. So if you've got cool opportunities you think I'd be interested in, or there's something you feel like I can help with, please don't hesitate to ask, because I won't know if you don't ask. So.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, this has been a eye-opening and riveting episode of 30 for 30. I really appreciate it, Clint. And if you would hang on as I stop recording, we'll continue with some formalities here.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.